So we're here with Dan Sandhu, the CEO of Digital Assess. How are you?
I'm good, Jack. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Cool. So a good place to start would be, could you tell us about your career and how you got to be where you are today?
I started my career as a chartered accountant. So I spent time as a chartered accountant, traveled the world, and then got involved in business services companies in the UK and overseas. And that led on me to starting investing in companies, particularly where there was a big component on servicing requirements and products and technologies, and I started getting involved in technology software businesses in a number of different sectors. But more recently, the last 5 or 6 years, I've been very much involved in education, both education technology and education services companies, as an investor, as an executive, also as a venture partner for an accelerator.
So what was that jump like, going from an investor to a CEO?
I think it's very interesting because I've kind of interspersed being an investor as well as an executive, and it's very good to sit on both sides of the table because you understand the drivers in terms of creating value, and that's very important when you run a business, to make sure you're totally aligned with your stakeholders. And if you've been a stakeholder or are a stakeholder in a business as an investor or a shareholder or a chairman or even a mentor, you really begin to understand better the dynamics. So for me, it's beneficial on both sides. On one side, as I'm running a business for investors, I understand what they require in terms of creating value. And on the other side, as I'm advising companies as a venture partner with an accelerator or as a direct shareholder, I can be better in terms of as a mentor because I understand the dynamics and the tough time they're going through sometimes in early stage businesses. Yeah.
Do you think that's quite important?
I think it's very important because my opinions about private equity and venture capital are not unusual amongst entrepreneurs, where I do think there's a lack of operational nous and operational depth, and which is not required in all investors. In some cases, investors need to be great financial managers, which is great. But some of the private equity funds and venture capitals lack that operational touch, and that's what sometimes alienates them from entrepreneurs. Others are fantastic at it. I'm grateful that my current investors in the business I'm running have a real kind of operational touch as well, and that does help as well.
Cool. So you mentioned the business you're running there. So could you give us an insight into the vision behind Digital Assess?
So Digital Assess is an evidence-based assessment business. What we provide is a deeper insight into learning from the perspective of the employers, the institutions, and in the case of North America, the funders, where they want evidence of learning, not just about the acquisition of knowledge. Acquisition of knowledge is great. These days, with the world of Google, with the world of available information, acquisition is great and it's very useful to test that and have proof of acquisition. But the application of knowledge, that's where the future is. And that the ability to gather evidence which demonstrates insight into someone's learning, that's what's key. And that's what we do. We provide a real useful insight into that learner, what they've learned, and how we can provide really good, validated, academically grounded evidence of that learning, which supports everyone, but most importantly supports the learner themselves to make sure they really understand what they've learned.
Cool. So I know you work quite a lot with exam boards, or exclusively for exam boards, you were saying before.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's a need for that kind of software within exam assessment?
I think I'm fortunate that we have some of the largest exam boards in the UK and therefore across Europe as our partners. Now we work very closely with them to make sure we provide technology which underpins some of their qualifications. This allows them to have better evidence while they're making their assessments. It allows them to scale their qualifications to international markets, because what we provide is some really core technology which is agnostic to geography or curriculum or scale, and therefore they can scale those qualifications to multiple territories much more easier by using our technologies. And so exam boards are great partners, and they do touch a lot of qualifications. We're focused on vocational qualifications in the main, as well as professional membership organizations, chartered institutions who have the similar challenge with their members. But we're increasingly looking at general qualifications as well.
Has it been easy to scale?
Yes, I mean, I've been fortunate that Digital Assess has a really strong technical pedigree, and therefore it's been built over a number of years with a strong academic and technical grounding. And one of the key remits for any edtech business is the ability to scale your technology. It's not always easy. It's very difficult because it requires capital investment. It requires good understanding of your core product. But if you can get that right, it means you can grow your business into multiple territories, into multiple sectors.
I suppose that's kind of a difficulty with running an edtech business, because on the one hand you've got to make it profitable, but on the other hand, the end goal, what you're trying to do, is really incredibly important.
Yeah.
So you've got to kind of keep that.
I think you're right. The balance is very important. I mean, the key thing in tech, there's a number of ways you can build an edtech business. You can be a content-centric business, or you can be a technology business. And I prefer the technology side. And I prefer technology because if you can get the model right about being, as I was saying, content agnostic and geography and curriculum agnostic, you can scale business really effectively. The challenge with edtech these days is people having a real clarity as to what they are. Where do they create value? Is it around content delivery and content expertise, or is it around technical ability and the ability to have good core underlying technologies? And I think that is probably the biggest hurdle edtech business is going through, to really understand what is their core value proposition. Do they understand what they're built to serve? And therefore, as with most businesses, do they have a real understanding of what their own drivers are? And once they get that, it does expand. I mean, the edtech business itself is a remarkable business right now in terms of sector. It's going through a massive growth globally, and I think the UK is really poised in a perfect position, given the pedigree of the education pedagogy in the UK, and given the ability of the UK businesses to fall back on some great institutions, global institutions based in the UK, and demonstrate the ability to take those learnings to international markets. We've found that exceptionally useful. Found having the UK experience with the awarding bodies, with the professional bodies, with the universities, has been exceptional in taking that learning to international markets, particularly what we're doing in North America, where they really value that experience. And the fact that we're a UK edtech business operating in international markets is seen as a very positive thing by us and our colleagues in the market.
Have you seen any kind of barriers to entry, particularly going towards international markets, being a London-based business?
I think, being London is fantastic. Being London-based is really useful. It gives you a great platform. I think the challenge is always with UK edtech businesses going international is having access to that international talent, having access to teams who've grown businesses internationally and taken UK propositions globally. They are sometimes restricted by content, so businesses in education technology which are solely around content find it sometimes difficult to transfer that content to international markets. For us, being a technology-based business, it's very easy. We've been running pilots and projects out in Singapore, in Australia, and with one of our clients, we're going out to Mauritius and Trinidad and Zambia, and also now, of course, looking at North America as well as the UK and the European markets. And that's based on the fact that we built the technology with a view that it can go anywhere. And the other important thing to remember is the technology is ubiquitous now. A student studying a particular subject, say mathematics or physics, in Australia, Singapore, or the UK, will access similar types of resources and be comfortable with similar types of technologies. Therefore, it's not a great leap for them to use the same technology in multiple territories. I suspect 10, 15 years ago in education, probably more recently, that was difficult. The barriers in different countries of access to technology and uniform technology platforms was quite difficult. Having our platform as a cloud platform, having it on the web rather than in individual servers based in our partners, makes it really easy for people to dial in. I oversaw a pilot that we were running in Australia while we sat in the UK, and it was seamless.
I read about a particular project you're doing with Edinburgh University, about kind of taking a crowdsourced approach to user feedback. What kind of?
That's a great. I'm glad you asked me that. There's a great example. What we do is with one of our products called Collaborate is get the learners to participate in the process of assessment. It can be tough being a student. You are quite sometimes removed from the experience. What we've developed is a platform and a product which allows users to undertake assessment as learners. So learners undertake assessment, they become part of the process, they're engaged in the process. The whole product therefore is around assessment, not of learning, but for learning. And it becomes a learning process. As the users look at other people's work, they can assess each other, they have access and transparency of what good looks like. and the product we have has a fantastic write-ups by our customers and the industry. We've won awards on the back of it, which proves that it provides a sort of 98.8% accuracy compared to traditional assessment, which is 60-70%. And remember, when you have the learners themselves participating in the process, it relieves a lot of pressure from the institution. It gets the learners engaged. They're retained in the process. Their attainment goes up. So we had a great feedback from Edinburgh in particular, where the attainment of the students increased. Why? Because they know what good looks like. Take the same principle in dispersed learning environments. MOOCs, as people call them, which is mass learning, open learning courses, or distance learning providers. What that does is they suddenly become part of the process. Rather than being dispersed students in a large ecosystem, they're suddenly part of the same group. What does that do? It drives retention. People stay on the course. The biggest issue with distance learning is people don't stick on the course. This way, they're part of the process, they feel engaged and empowered, and they stay longer on the course, or they do the distance with the course, which is an upside to anyone. For the providers of the MOOC courses, want better engagement. For the learners themselves, they benefit. And for the institutions themselves, it's a good, probably better validation of their material than people dropping out.
Do you see that as one of the, well, I'm sure you see that as one of the key edtech trends?
I think the edtech trends of distance learning is very important. I mean, it goes through its natural fads, and people talk about distance learning before there's an infrastructure. If you look at distance learning now, one of the key drivers and the key issues is people undertake distance learning, but there's no accreditation or assessment at the end of it. I think previously people would have thought, well, there's a lack of technology. I'm way past that. We have, as a business ourselves, but the industry itself has fantastic technology ecosystems now. We at Digital Assess have great technology which would allow something like distance learning to be much more prevalent, because it provides the ability to undertake really good, accurate assessment and therefore great accreditation. I think that's a shift we'll see. We'll see the adoption of really high-end technology, which brings that whole distance learning market much more easier to access, because people can see the certification at the end.
Yeah. So if you see a kind of proliferation of distance learning starting to emerge, where do you think the future classroom will be?
I think a couple of things, and it's a dynamic in the economy. We've moved from an academic to almost a vocational and skills view set, and that's primarily because that's what the needs are. So yes, there's moving from distance learning, but there's also a big move in terms of people understanding, and employers particularly, that qualifications are important. They're very important, and GCSEs, A-levels, and degrees where they occur are very important as qualifications. But the real-world experience, the ability to have evidence of that rounded experience, is still missing. A number of large employers now are recruiting without sight of exam results, because they really want to understand what the rounded individual looks like. And that's all about gathering evidence, not just at the end of a process, but through the process of learning. Have they acquired the skills to work in the big bad world? People's engagement with employers or disengagement with employers will rarely be because of their qualifications or intellect. It'll be because of their practical skills, the ability to demonstrate that. And technologies exist now. We are quite proud of our technologies, which allow you to gather evidence during the process of learning, so that employers, through professional institutions, have access to that. And that's visible now with apprenticeships. The UK, thankfully, are having a big push on apprenticeships, and all of that is around vocational skills. As a nation, that's one area that we have fallen behind on in terms of pushing out. We really need to take it seriously. Other countries, recently an article in one of the press recently was talking about the skills conference occurring in South America at the moment. The Americans and the Russian teams and the Brazilian teams had a lot of government profile and push. And I think we need to take it as a nation much more seriously, because the future of the economic development in this country is not going to be driven by K-12 and primary, secondary education, but in the immediate term, it's going to be driven by professional skills, vocational skills, and a good ecosystem which gives employers comfort that those skills exist.
So I suppose that's where you're seeing a huge number.
Absolutely. I think that's EdTech 2.0. Yeah. EdTech 2.0 is about providing the professional and development educational environments and vocational skills environment really strong technical infrastructure, which is what we provide.
Yeah, but it's more kind of differing methods of accreditation
Yeah.
that allow you to do that, and the lifelong learning piece.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of professional institutions now are passionate about not just apprenticeships, but making sure their membership have access to learning all the way through, having not just a typical e-learning portfolio, but something much more wider and deeper, where there's evidence of learning with the learner through their life cycle as members of the institution, which they can hold out as badges for their growth in their careers.
Mm. You mentioned before about kind of vocational courses
Yeah.
and the importance of them. What role do you think the government has to play?
I think the government is doing exactly the right things, and I think they can push harder. I mean, the push now by the current government and the previous coalition around apprenticeships is very important, not just because it makes great headlines, because employers benefit. I mean, I talk to a number of employers who work with our awarding bodies and or our professional bodies who are looking for that kind of evidence. They're looking for the participation of those awarding bodies, those professional bodies to drive apprenticeships, because it's a core of some of the vocational skills that we as a nation need right now to continue with the growth.
Sure. Okay, so last question.
Yeah.
What do you think educators need to do to get more out of people?
I think at the primary, secondary level, I think education is all around being enabled, not overpowered by technology. Technology is very important, but it's got to be enabled, not overpowered. It's very important at the early years to make sure that human touch exists quite well. In terms of as you go into senior education and vocational education, I think using technologies to drive that engagement, providing the educators and the institutions with the ability to engage more directly with their learners, make sure there's an active feedback environment with the learners, and more social learning is important. The world's moving. The learners operate in a world of social media, and we're sat here with multiple devices streaming on multiple social media. That's how learning works. And I think as soon as people realize that the learning environment and the media environment are quite intertwined now, that's the tools that are required. The ability to capture evidence in multiple forms, ability to assess and provide feedback in multiple forms. As you were asking me earlier, the ability for learners to collaborate in a social learning environment. That's all that's required. Those kind of technologies provide the teacher, as you say, or the educator and the institution great ammunition to make sure that the learner stays at the heart of the process and the technology provides them all the tools they need.
Great. Well, pleasure having you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much,